Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're talking about how to handle homegrown jihadists. The French government estimates that there are some 740 of them. We can break down the numbers for you a little bit later on. Homegrown jihadists, which were discussed at the cabinet meeting this Wednesday with new measures. They include cyber patrollers and a Europe-wide plan to get in touch with internet access providers and social media that host calls to jihad. None Too Soon says the distressed mother of a boy, she's now in contact with him only by text message.
He wrote, "I love you, Mum. This is what Allah wants. It's not me who decided. If you see me again, it will be in heaven, God willing." We need to control Facebook across borders, and all these videos of fanatics with their weapons, their beards, their turbans, and all the rest.
The need to control Facebook, she says. Let's say hello to James Creedon, man in charge of our Media Watch segment.
Evening, François.
James, on this score, the self-radicalization, as it were, what have you found?
All right, well, it's certainly a phenomenon. It's something that we've been looking at on Media Watch and elsewhere over the last number of months. There was a video, if you go back to July of last year, of two Toulouse-based brothers, and you can see a video here. And in that video, they addressed a message to François Hollande, telling him to convert to Islam, to to ignore his American and Jewish friends, etc. And in a video at the time, that video is obviously no longer available on the internet. You can even see them sending a postcard to their grandmother. Now, they were French-born, they had no links to Syria, and they were radicalized on the internet. And that video appeal that they made was all part of that. They had already traveled there. Another story that reached France 24 very closely was a story that we covered a couple of months ago. One of our journalists here, a friend of hers, actually, and she saw this on Facebook, went to Syria to wage holy war. Now, she entered into a communication with him over several weeks and logged that story. And Charlotte Boisteau is her name. And indeed, again, it seems that his ideas and his radicalization took place very much online. It wasn't in his real life, his three-dimensional life in the Paris area. There was also the story recently of two teenagers, French teenagers, 15 and 16 years of age, also from the Toulouse
15
area.
And 16.
That's right, who with their father's credit card actually travelled as far as Syria before returning to... They became disillusioned and then returned, but they did spend 21 days there, showing the extent to which this is a phenomenon that is very real. You know, teenagers being recruited via the internet and then making that decision to travel, sometimes perhaps with a background that has links to the Arab world, but not necessarily. In the first instance that we showed earlier, Nicolas and Jean-Daniel, 30 and 23 years old respectively, sending that postcard to their grandmother, they had no links with the Arab world. They were radicalized online. Now, of course, it's not just a French phenomenon. There is also there were three British extremists who, as this headline on Vice.com says, loved social media. And indeed, this is an angle that I think is worth exploring, because there is a far greater visibility nowadays of this phenomenon. People are sharing on social media. Again, there was a Dutch jihadist, as another example, who had a blog where he frequently charted his travails out in Syria, putting photos such as these up online. So I think the phenomenon has a huge visibility because these people are communicating via social media, which also is something to be taken into account. Are we over exaggerating the what would you say, the phenomenon, because it has such a great visibility? That is something perhaps keeping in mind. And we'll just finish, François, with the fact that even the Syrian regime, the presidency, Bashar al-Assad and his wife, are very much present on social media, on Instagram. I think the presidency opened an Instagram account back in July of last year in a bid to put a positive image forward. And you can see here on the Daily Mail website how they've juxtaposed the images of propaganda going up on Instagram with the reality, those other images appearing elsewhere online. So it's also worth taking into account, I suppose, that it's a tool of propaganda, whatever way you want to use it.
All right, James Creedon, many thanks for that. Let's, at this point, reintroduce our panel and say hello to them once again. Gail MIHAELY, of Causeur.fr. We'll say hello as well to Yamine, SOUM, who teaches at the Sorbonne, the author of Islamophobia in the Modern World. We're also with Nicolas VINOCUR of the Reuters news agency. And from London, Hanif Kadir, co-founder of the Active Change Foundation, a charity created to prevent and counter violent extremism. And also from London, Olivier GUITTA, Director of Research at the Henry Jackson Society. I'll begin with you, Olivier. Rebounding off of all of this, the French government's announcement that it's going to put what it calls, these are the terms of the Interior Minister, cyber patrollers on the task. Is that going to work?
Probably not. It's a first step. Obviously, what they have to build is a counter-narrative as much as possible, show how ISIL is a very violent group, even go and show graphic images to really put a discourse to the jihadist view, which is still very romantic. We're going to go to Syria and save our other Muslim brothers. They need to be very strong as far as what needs to be done. But at the same time, websites are going to prop up all over the place. So I don't think it's feasible to think that you're going to be cyber patrolling. What has worked reasonably well in the past is when they had people infiltrate some of the jihadist forum and try little by little to influence people by getting closer to them. But that's something that needs to be done in the long run rather than just for a few months.
Hanif Kadir, can you build a counter-narrative over the internet for those young people who go and isolate themselves in their bedroom and who get, as we were saying earlier, self-indoctrinated?
You have to have a sliding scale. You have to have a sliding scale in a counter-narrative form. You build one counter-narrative and you will find another narrative that's going to counter your counter-narrative. So it will work for a short period, but then you have to keep on coming up with counter-narratives to challenge all the narratives that are going to coming out. So, and that's not really a feasible way forward, I would say. We've learned through experience that you can have one counter-narrative for one particular issue, but then all of a sudden something else pops up. And, the gentleman was right that you close one down and another website pops up. So you're going to be forever building counter-narratives. It's not going to work. But I will disagree with the gentleman slightly, where policing the web may deter individuals to a degree. It won't go far enough, but it will certainly help security services to deter young men and women from traveling abroad. So we need to look at it differently. And when we talk about communities and young men and women who are coming from these communities, I'm going to say with authority and experience is that engaging with our communities is essential to tackling this problem. Without community engagement, I'm afraid we're only going to address a quarter of the problem.
Gil MIHAELY?
Yes, I'm just want to mention the fact that the 250 French who are in Syria, the 70 to 80 that came back recently, are only the tip of the iceberg, because we interviewed Judge Tredevic a few weeks ago, and he estimates that for every French who goes to Syria, there are about 100 that would like to go, that thinks it's a good idea to go, that feels that those who go are heroes, but they don't because they are too afraid, because they don't have money, or because they were caught in the last moment. So what we're dealing here is with a much larger number of people, and I think that there's no one.
We have heard stories, for instance, of young people going, and one who even called his dad to say he was homesick and lonely and wanted to come home.
Yes, because in a way, it's a phenomena of adolescence. We know we're talking about parents unaware of what's going on. How many parents unfortunately discover that their their teenagers, sons and daughters are using drugs, or have abominable friends, or have a boy or a girlfriend for 6 months and never heard his name. Teenagers have a secret life. Technology makes the secret life even easier than before, and they sometimes they commit suicide. And the typical reaction is, we didn't see anything. He was a wonderful boy or girl. 3 months ago, everything went all right. In a way, it's a teenager phenomenon. In a way, not 100%. But what I'm trying to say is that we don't have only a problem with the 250 who left, and probably everyone has their names, and they will be picked up when they come back, and they will get treated in a way or another. What happens with the 5 or 10,000? They didn't go all the way, but in their minds, they did go all the way.
5 or 10,000, you say? Do you agree with that?
Because I'm saying that because Judge Tredevic said that for everyone who goes to Syria, there's about 100 that wants to go but don't go.
Yamine, SOUM, do you agree that it is that kind of exponential proportion between those who actually go through them?
I don't agree. We have to see the reality. The reality is people who go or not go to Syria, and even as you mentioned before, there is some people who they just ask themselves what they are doing there, because they know that it's other realities. A lot of people are living from Syria, and now some young people, they are trying to go there. But I think what is interesting is why they go to Syria, because if you are Muslim in France, you can have the feeling of Islamophobia. There is a lot of conflict in the world. There is some Muslims minority persecuting in China, in Birmania, in Central Africa. And why Syria? There is a kind of fascination created by these groups, and there is some networks in Syria, and they help these young people to go there. But I don't think that it's a huge phenomenon. I think that the majority of the young people, as you mentioned before, they have like their secret life. They want to have some. They have to live in the kind of dangerous life. They are building themselves. So I think that this is not an important phenomenon.
Nicolas VINOCUR, when you compare with surrounding countries, is it very French? You come out of the cabinet meeting and you announce the hotline, the cyber patrollers, the measures some of them to be put in place by prefects, the superintendents for the various regions.
Yeah. Well, I think it's French in the sense that it's very top-down and it's directed by the state, and that's what sort of people expect. They expect the state to do something.
Including the citizens.
Absolutely. We interviewed the mother of Jean Daniel and his brother who were killed in Syria, and she had the clear expectation that she should be able to pick up the phone and speak to the police or speak to an expert within the government who could help her out. And in fact, that's what she did. So when I hear people say, nobody's ever going to call in the government, parents frequently call the police on their own children if they think they're turning into jihadis. It's a last resort, but they do it. Is it the first? Is it very French? Absolutely. And what's also particularly French is how long it's taken for these measures to be put into place. The war in Syria has been going on for 3 years. We've known about large numbers of Europeans going for over a year. In Germany, in the UK, de-radicalization, in the community has been put in place through various methods. And in France, there's been a hesitation. We know that Manuel Valls, the new prime minister, has had these plans on his desk for many months. This is not a sort of spontaneous reaction to the return of,
and was
of
it
this hostage.
the freeing of those 4 French hostages?
No, I think it was a matter
their
of
jailers
timing.
were.
I think it was a matter
French
of timing.
speakers?
It was that probably was part of it. It was a positive moment at which to unveil this thing politically, and I think they decided to do it right then. But there has been a debate raging within the government as to whether this is even a good idea, because A lot of people like to describe the people who leave to Syria as victims, people who've been manipulated. And I think in a lot of cases that's true. Somebody who's 15 years old, may not have the judgment. And indeed, we should have strict measures to make sure their parents know what they're doing. But in other cases, they're fully responsible for what they do. And from the point of view of the security services, it's best to know who's leaving and to let them go. And we know that these people have left the country already listed as people to watch by the French Interior Ministry, and they've been let to go with regards. So that's this sort of tricky balance that you have to strike between therapy, help, bringing people back into the fold, and also identifying which people are not going to come back into the fold and have no interest in re-engaging with their community, because the entire community is suspect, is at odds with a certain version of Islam. It's not nobody, there are no imams. That the entire French Muslim community that's sanctioned by the state is rejected by jihadis. So you can engage with the community, but the community already preaches against jihad. So it's a very difficult, tricky problem to attack.
I was also going to say on that point, Olivier GUITTA, these young people, when they come home, they're going to be detained, interrogated. How do you entice them home? How do you get them to come home?
Literally, it's going to be twofold. The first one will be when they'll realize they got way over their heads going into a country that they don't know, fighting a fight that they don't know or even understand, and being put in a situation with groups such as ISIL that even Al-Qaeda says too extremist for them. What they will view as a problem will push them to come back. And the reaction of some youngsters to say, "Oh, I miss my home and the comfort of Europe," is going to come back quickly. The issue that I have is the part of the measure. One of them is the stripping of the citizenship. That can be done only if they are dual citizens, because otherwise they cannot be without a passport. So I don't think this would work. But I think it's just part of the showing how bad things are. I mean, especially to be at the low grade. So when French citizens come into Syria, they're put to be, just watchers for the hostages, for instance, rather than being trusted with much larger responsibilities.
Hanif Kadir, for British jihadis, is it the same experience?
I think we share common issues. I mean, it's not different in France. It's not different in Europe, any parts of Europe. It's the same issue that we face and we experience here as well. And I'd like to say, look, we've got to consider a number of different factors here. When I talk about community engagement, that's actually giving parents the option to contact community institutions, organizations that are set up in the community where parents can access and talk about their young man or their young daughter going on jihad or, being radicalized. When we've got young men and women going over there in their droves, and I have to say that I agree with the point where the gentleman says, for every young man that comes back or every young woman that comes back from Syria, may not 100, but not short of, that number will be attracted to go to Syria. We've got a lot of very emotional young men and women in our communities, whether we're in France or whether we're in the UK. We share similar, young people will be young people across the world. So a lot of them are very emotional and very sympathetic towards the suffering of innocent women and children in Syria or in conflict zones. So they are being drawn and attracted to that because of their emotions, but also supported by theology. So when they're going to Syria, and if they survive and they come back, we have to consider a number of things. One, they're going to attract a number of other young men and women to go there. But number two, they're going to be very traumatized by what they've been exposed to. We have soldiers, trained soldiers who are coming back from conflict who need counseling because of the trauma that they're experiencing. So we have to look at a number of different aspects, and we have to engage at all levels, whether it's through government institutions, medical institutions, law enforcement, or community institutions. Everybody has to come together to address this problem. If we don't come together to address this problem, that's going to be getting a lot worse, may I add, then I'm afraid we're going to be failing our young men and women, but also we're going to be undermining our own national interests.
Nicolas VINOCUR, are neighboring states doing any better at dealing with all of this?
I think it's difficult to measure results, and that's partly the problem. There's been a group in Germany called Exit that used to help skinheads, neo-Nazis reintegrate normal society, and they apparently have a fairly good success rate. I think they help something like 60% of the people who come in to lead normal lives again. There have been similar efforts in Britain. The one real expert I've spoken to says the fact is that none of these measures are totally effective. And it has to do with the very particular mindset of people who actually joined jihad in Syria. The idea is that you reject all of Western society. You reject all the values, you reject everything that it proposes, and therefore you're not really a candidate for being sort of brought back. You don't want to come back, and a lot of people don't want to come back. So there are interesting things, for example, in Saudi Arabia, where they're kind of on the front line of this issue. They have centers where they help young men, they teach them a more moderate version of Islam, and the idea is that you've been sold a deviant, a fake form of Islam, and we're going to give you the real deal again. And these people, this supposedly helps them back into normal society. But I want to say that some of these people are inoculated already against that. They already identify the moderate form of Islam as faulty and as a lie, and the only real form of Islam is jihad. So it's very difficult to sort of fight fire with fire here.
Yamine, SOUM, we were mentioning it earlier, and Gil was saying it quite eloquently. It's teenage rebellion, a lot of instances. Can the family get through to these young people, perhaps in a way where government and programs can't?
Yeah, I think that's it's very important to try to understand how the family can be involved in this to fight this phenomena. But I think the society have to change even the terms we use. We use the term jihad, and in France we have the case of a young man, 24 years old, who went to Syria with his young baby called Asia. And we have really to communicate in this idea that this is not war, this is not jihad, this is just like in this case criminality, And using the term of jihad, we are in this case helping them this movement. We really have to communicate in this idea that what they are committed, it's crimes in Syria, and even in the civil war. We have to, we were talking about the diplomatical action. We have to try to help even the different position or political parties in Syria, the opposition of Assad, to try to build a peace in Syria, because it's a problem for all the region of the Middle East. So I think this is the 2 points. But we have to communicate this idea they are not jihadists. When you go to Syria with a young baby, and the mother of this young baby, she's trying to recognize that the fact that this is an hostage and this is not jihad, this is just criminality.
All right, and we'll leave it there for now. I want to thank you very much, Yamine SOUM, for joining us, Gil MIHAELY, Nicolas VINOCUR, and I want to thank from London Olivier GUITTA, as well as Hanif Kadir for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Stay with us, much more to come right here on France 24.
The 51%.
Hello, I'm Annette Young, and in a very special edition of the 51%, we meet 3 extraordinary Nobel Peace Prize winners, all of whom happen to be women. Join me as I ask them, does gender really matter when it comes to making peace? That's the 51% here on France 24.
The 51% on France 24 and on France24.com.